Yeah, so we'll start the second session of the day. So, good morning, everyone. So, I welcome back all the participants to the second session of the day of the AICT New Delhi sponsored Atal FDP, hosted by Department of Mechanical Engineering, Mangalore Institute of Technology and Engineering, Karnataka, and I am Mohan Kumar, Associate Professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. To begin with, I extend a warm welcome on behalf of our department and institution to our respected resource person, Dr. Milind Vishwanath Rane, Institute Chair Professor, Mechanical Engineering Department, IIT Bombay, for this session. Welcome you, sir.
Namaskar.
It gives me a great pleasure to introduce a legendary personality, Dr. Milind Vishwanath Rane of IIT Bombay. He is the Institute Chair Professor in HAG Scale at Mechanical Engineering Department of prestigious institution of national importance, IIT Bombay. He obtained his PhD from University of Maryland at College Park, USA. He has greatly contributed to the fields of energy conservation, HVAC&R, and alternate energy sources. His achievements are unlimited and only few of them are enumerated here. He has successfully handled 131 consultancy projects and 20 sponsored projects. He has more than 90 publications and 3 book chapters in refereed journals to his credit. Having presented more than 124 invited lectures at reputed organizations, he has guided 18 doctoral theses and 95 MTech theses. In association with Heat Pump Laboratory at IIT Bombay, he has filed a total 43 patents, out of which 33 Indian patents, which include 18 granted patents, 12 successfully defended and awaiting grant, and 3 awaiting the examination. Also, he owns 3 European patents and 7 PCTs. His milestones of achievement are not limited to this. 27 of his products are either technology transferred, licensed, or commercialized. He is also the past president and life member of prestigious Indian Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers, ISHRAE, and a member of American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers, ASHRAE. For his vast contribution to the community of technology, he has been honored with many prestigious awards. To name a few: Nina Saxena Award for Technology Development and Commercialization, Breyer Award for Product Design, Dr. P.K. Patwardhan Award for Technology Development, VIK Award for Technology Development, and Eureka Business Plan Award. With this brief introduction, I once again welcome you, sir, for this session, and I hand over the floor to you, sir. Please, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to share my this. Can I get? Yeah. Hello. Namaskar. Are you able to hear me clearly?
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I hope my slide is also visible.
Yes, sir.
I'm changing them, so I hope it is this. Okay.
Yeah,
So
it is
let me
visible.
start. Thank you. First, let me thank you for the opportunity to share some of the work that we have done in this area and the generous introduction. Today's topic is going to be options for improving sustainability in HVAC&R. And these are some of the technologies that the heat pump laboratory has developed. And now, of course, in fact, the 19th patent is also granted. Let me just say that. Okay, now coming to the first slide, as it is outline of my presentation. We will briefly review the various technologies, namely electric and heat-driven multi-utility heat pumps. We'll look at heat recovery units, because using the recovered heat, we can operate heat-driven refrigeration systems or heat-driven multi-utility heat pumps. So we can discuss some of the options that we have available for recovering exhaust heat from engines, furnaces, turbines, and so on and so forth for various applications. Then we'll also look at renewables, where waste heat is not available or electricity is limited. Or if renewables are available in reasonable amount, I think tapping into renewables is another good option to reduce our environmental CO2 emissions and environmental impact. Okay. So before we get into all these things, I would like to impress upon you that we need to first reduce our demand for cooling, heating, air conditioning, ventilation, refrigeration, and all those things. And then after having first reduced the demand, then we should try and look at the most efficient equipment which we can deploy to cater to these things. And we should then see whether we can integrate these systems with some of the other processes in the plant or in the facility to recover and recycle some of the energy which is otherwise getting wasted, or some of the other resources that are getting released into the atmosphere without effectively tapping them. And after we have completed all these options, checked out all these options, I think then we should look at tapping into renewables, because usually renewables is a costlier option. It is also intermittent, and so we need to keep backup for renewables. So renewables should be resorted to in the end, after we have first reduced the demand for the utilities, catered to the utilities with the best possible systems that are available at that time, and then integrating the systems to recover, recycle the availability from various sources, and then go to renewables. Now, the need and scope for superheat recovery, heat pumps, waste heat recovery will be briefly discussed. And then we'll get into various heat recovery systems and salient features of them, namely exhaust heat recovery unit for engines, gas turbines, furnaces, centers. And then we'll also look at plastic and aluminum air-to-air heat recovery units for air conditioning applications. Now, applications like superheat recovery will take a review of the conventional heat exchangers and the heat exchanger, the novel heat exchanger, which is based on tube-tube configuration, which offers several advantages. So we'll see what are the salient features of that, and how that has offered a very reliable heat exchanger for this particular application. Some of our heat exchangers have operated for over 11 years without a single service call. After that, we'll briefly look at various case studies for superheat recovery and heat pump systems that we have developed, deployed through on our own, through my own company, which we operated for about 3 years, and then licensed to various manufacturers, and then they have continued the deployment. So we'll look at the 60-ton R22 chiller in a hotel, which supplied hot water to the hotel for around 11 years without a single service call. We'll then look at the 270-ton ammonia refrigeration system based superheat recovery water heater, heating water from 25 to 75, 80, 84 degrees centigrade. Then we'll look at hot water heating system for a fast food outlet. And these were deployed in McDonald's, and more than 340 of them are deployed in various McDonald's at one point. And then we'll look at multi-utility heat pumps. Multi-utility means, normally if you look at an air conditioner, it either gives you air conditioning alone, or if it is a chiller, it produces chilled water alone as a useful utility. Now, there are heat pumps which can do heating in winter and cooling in summer and monsoon. But that also produces only one utility at a time, although it can generate both utilities during different periods of the year. Now, our multi-utility heat pumps concurrently generate more than one utility, and that too in a flexible manner. So we'll see some of the features, because this is very important to improve the energy efficiency, overall energy efficiency of the system. Now, just to give you a few examples, I have been using a multi-utility heat pump in my house, which is a 4-in-1 unit. It currently, it has been deployed since 2003. And it is still being operated. Even today, I took my bath with the hot water coming from that. So it gives me air conditioning in 2 rooms, my dining area and the bedroom, and it generates. It is a 1.5 ton compressor based system, and it gives me around 7 kilowatts of hot water. So we use the water for bathing, dishwashing, washing machine input, and so on and so forth. And it also has the capability of generating potable chilled water as and when required in summer. If you want to make some sarbat or serve some chilled sarbat or something to the guests, anything like that. Okay, wash some fruits with chilled water so that the taste improves. It also dries our clothes. In Mumbai, drying of clothes is in monsoon season is quite a challenge. So our clothes get dried overnight. Even if we put the wash clothes on the line in the dry balcony at night before we sleep, by the time we get up, the clothes are crisp, dry, and warm. So it's a pleasure to wear them after the bath. And all this while we are using the air conditioner in monsoon season for dehumidification. We set the temperature, indoor temperature, at around 27 degrees, and it just goes on and off briefly to give you this. So a 4-in-1 heat pump. We'll look at industrial heat pumps, 2, 3 utility heat pumps, and we'll also discuss briefly about a 6-in-1 heat pump, which we have deployed a couple of years ago at NTPC Netra. Then we will look at the renewables. We'll look at various solar collectors and their salient features. We have plastic air heaters, which can heat up air to about 70, 80, 90 degrees centigrade. We have evacuated glass tube based air heaters, which can heat up air from ambient to 300 degrees centigrade in a single pass, 150 to 300 degrees centigrade in a single pass. We have solar steam generators, a 1-through steam generator where tap water can come in and you can get steam at 1-2 bar. And we have generated superheated steam up to 200 degrees centigrade at 10 bar also. And then we have heat pipe based steam generators. We have liquid desiccant based multi-utility heat pump, which generates dehumidified air as one of the utilities. It generates potable hot water. It heats up water for potable sanitation. It also produces potable water. It harnesses the water which the liquid desiccant has picked up as a distilled water form. Okay, so it generates 3 utilities using solar energy. In fact, I've just submitted a paper based on one of my PhD students' work in recent ISRE journal, which should be coming up soon. The current, the upcoming issue is likely to have 2 of our papers in the ISRE journal. That is Indian Society of Heating, Refrigerating, Air Conditioning journal, Society's journal. And one is going to be on condenser heat recovery desalination system. The people from Chennai, they will appreciate if we can produce our own potable water at home using the condenser heat, which is being wasted right now by dumping it into the atmosphere. Then we'll also briefly look at an adsorption refrigerator cum water heater, which we had developed and licensed to Godrej. But now the economics, at that time, it was almost 1/3 the cost of the conventional electric air refrigerator plus a solar water heater. But now there are better options than even that. And then we'll conclude after taking a brief review of various technologies that we have licensed. Now, this is the presentation is pretty long and the time is limited. I have around 111 slides in my presentation. So what I'm going to do is I'm on the first few 10-15 slides, I will spend a lot of time to give you a flavor of what all is possible and then we will go through rather quickly through the rest of the thing. The slides are available with the organizers, so they can share them with you if required. Of course, the presentation can also be shared. So getting started, first I would like to take you through the multi-utility heat pumps and superheat recovery water heater. So as I said, multi-utility heat pump generates more than one utility using a single refrigeration system or air conditioning system or this. Okay. So the configuration of the system, the cycle is very similar to what we have in a refrigerator or a air conditioner or a heat pump. The only thing is the heat exchangers are judiciously integrated in it in such a way that we can generate like this particular unit, which was deployed in Mahindra and Mahindra in an automotive factory. The primary purpose of this was to heat up cleaning solution in washing machines from 50 to 55 degrees centigrade. Now, while the solution was being heated with the condenser heat, the heat was being picked up on the evaporator side from the room air or the shop floor air. So the shop floor air would get in from this side as well as a similar heat filter on the other side, and then there were two heat exchangers inside where the evaporator would cool, dehumidify the air, and then the air will be returned back into the environment, in the indoor environment, thereby air conditioning the indoor space of a shop floor. And this recovered heat plus the compressor power to compress the refrigerant would then be delivered in the condenser, through the condenser to the solution which is being heated. As it was the shop floor was not originally air conditioned, the management was not ready to take credit, give us credit for the saving because of the air conditioning. So we said that, okay, we'll generate some chilled water, and that chilled water was then supplied into the water coolers. So the compressors for the portable water coolers was no longer required to be operated. So thus, this 3-in-1 heat pump has been operating, and as far as I know, they were operating for more than 8 to 10 years in the industrial environment. Okay, and this particular unit with a footprint of only 1 meter by 1 meter is capable of generating around 36 kilowatts of heating using a 8.3 ton compressor, nominal capacity compressor. Now, if a 12-ton compressor, we have also deployed similar size units with 12-ton compressor, where the heat exchangers on the evaporator side would be extended all the way to the top, and the filters will be also extended to the top, and then we could give up to 55 kilowatts of hot water or heating duty from that particular unit, while concurrently giving around 42 kilowatts of air conditioning plus chilled water as and when required. So this is an example of a 3-in-1 heat pump which was deployed in the industry, namely Mahindra and Mahindra. And then we have here another example where we have a multi-utility heat pump which is directly connected to the indoor coil of the McDonald's kitchen. So that is a DX cooling is provided for a 24-ton capacity in the kitchen area. And this also co-produces hot water for dishwashing and cleaning and other sanitation purposes. It also produces chilled water for drinking, or for the water which is carbonated and served as Coke and other cold drinks and things like that, was being pre-cooled from 32 degrees to 12 to 15 degrees centigrade using the same unit. And so 3 utilities were being served: DX cooling in the kitchen, hot water for sanitation, and chilled water for dispensing as soft drinks and chilled water, so on and so forth, for drinking purposes. Moreover, this unit was capable of saving around 25 to 36% of the power required by just the air-cooled chiller. Air-cooled chiller, yes, which was earlier deployed in that location. And the power consumed by the fans in this case was around 1/9 of that of the conventional air-cooled chiller. And this we were able to do using a evaporatively cooled condenser in this. So instead of an air-cooled condenser, we have a technology called rotating contacting device or diabatic contacting device. And that enabled us to evaporatively condense the refrigerant. And evaporatively condensing the refrigerant, as you may know, evaporative condensation allows you to reduce the condensing temperature to the lowest possible extent as compared to air cooled, then tower water cooled, and then best is the evaporative cooling. So evaporative cooling gives you the lowest condensing temperature. Lower condensing temperature helps you reduce the condensing pressure. Reduced condensing pressure reduces the compressor power required, and so your COP increases because of that. And reduced condensing temperature also reduces the refrigerant temperature coming out of the condenser. So that also helps you improve the cooling effect in the per unit refrigerant circulated because of reduced flashing. So because of all these reasons put together, this multi-utility heat pump with evaporative condensation enabled us to save around 25 to 36% of energy using this particular system. Then places where you don't have, you need hot water and you have existing air conditioners deployed, we have developed what we call a superheat recovery water heater. And this superheat recovery water heater basically gets connected between the compressor and the condenser. So superheated vapor going from the compressor outlet to the condenser, it is routed through this heat exchanger, and hot water is generated using this heat, which is tap. Now, this superheat recovery technology is not new. Even in 1970s, when the first oil crisis hit the world, these type of heat exchangers were being imported by some of our top refrigeration air conditioning industries in the country. But these systems were based on shell and tube heat exchangers and things like that, and they led to leakages and mixing of the refrigerant and the water being heated, potable water being heated. And if the water leaked into the refrigeration circuit, the entire refrigeration system had to be shut down. It had to be cleaned up thoroughly and then restarted, because of a major catastrophe as far as the hotels or this, and no chief engineer or industrial plant operators would be happy to have any get into that kind of situation. So although the potential for energy saving was phenomenal, the saving in terms of monetary saving was very good. Because of reliability issues, these systems were not being used extensively. So we developed superheat recovery unit using our tube heat exchanger patent, where multiple tubes are put side by side, and one of the working fluids, that is the refrigerant, passes through one set of tubes, and the water to be heated passes through the other set of tubes. Okay. Now, because it is a double wall vented design, the chance of mixing of the refrigerant and the water is very, very remote. And because of this, what happens is that this heat exchanger becomes very reliable. So as I said, we have had systems operating for over 11 years without a single service call in a hotel, generating 12 to 24,000 liters of hot water per day. So these are some of the systems that I just shared with you. Now, there are many applications. It could be used for heating of air, heating of water. It can heat process fluids directly because of this reliable heat exchanger. We could heat up the process fluid, that is the cleaning solution, directly with our condenser heat. Normally, heat pumps will heat up water, a clean stream of water, and then that clean stream of water would be used to heat the process stream, thereby adding one more heat exchanger, one more recirculation loop, and so on and so forth. In this case, we are eliminating those complexities, we are simplifying the system, we are reducing the cost of the system, and overall the system controls and everything becomes much simpler. And because if it is a system simple, it is also likely to be more reliable. And so our reliability was also proven to be very, very high. The other options where we use these type of heat exchangers is for systems is for concurrently cooling air, cooling water, cooling potable water, and cooling process streams directly. So this tube heat exchanger has been a core to many of our technologies that we have deployed, okay, in various systems here. The other advantage of a tube heat exchanger is that of very low inventory. Some of you might be aware that we have to switch over to more environment friendly refrigerants, like with less ozone depletion, with less global warming potential, and so on and so forth. But many times the options are either flammable or toxic, and so on and so forth, and it becomes very important to minimize the inventory of the refrigerant. So here is an example where we have deployed the tube-tube heat exchanger in a multi-utility ammonia heat pump, where on one side we are chilling water from 12 to 7, just like in any other chiller, and the other side we are heating water from 25 to 55 in a single pass. No recirculation. Tap water can come in at 25 and it can get heated and it can go out at 55 in a single pass, no recirculation. Typically, most of the heat exchangers, whether they're shell and tube or plate type and things like that, are not in a position to heat up water through such high temperature changes, water or any other fluid through such high temperature changes in single pass. But our tube-tube heat exchangers enable us to do that because we can have long tubes of 6 meter or even 12 meter. We have done heat exchangers with even up to 18 meter long passages on the tubes. And in that case, we have even gone from 20 degrees to 90 degrees centigrade water heating in single pass. Share some of those things when we come to that. Okay, so the advantage here is you have extremely low inventory per ton, only 0.1 kg per ton. Is the ammonia charge. Even best of systems that are commercially available today are having around 200 grams of charge or 0.2 kg of charge per ton of this in an ammonia system. Okay, so we are much lower than that, and this was the older design. Now the newer designs with appropriately modified tubes and heat exchanger manufacturing technique, we will be in a position to even bring it down below this also. Okay. So if you look at the thing, this is producing cooling with a COP of 3 to 3.3 while chilling water from 12 to 7, and concurrently it is delivering hot water with a COP of 3.9 to 4.2. So this overall COP of the system jumps up to 6.9 to 7.5, which is extremely good. And higher COP means lower energy input. Lower energy input means lower environmental impact. And if a single system can produce two utilities, you'll be using less refrigerant. So again, the environmental effects will be much better. Now coming to the next, this is a multi-utility heat pump. It was commissioned in May 2017, and I believe it is still operating well in NTPC Netra. And this is a 6-in-1 heat pump. So 6 different utilities are being catered to using a single unit. This unit looks like this, and it's placed outside the canteen area. This is 1/3 of the space that we are air conditioning. This is the canteen in the NTPC Netra. This Netra is the R&D headquarters, R&D wing of the National Thermal Power Corporation, and in their Noida, Greater Noida facility, this was deployed. So earlier, this system was being catered to with 2 DRF systems, which were placed on the terrace, and then there was the air conditioning was ducted in here. Now, we provided them with a system which can do dehumidification and cooling and maintain the indoor at 27 degrees and 60% RH in summer and monsoon. And in winter, we would provide 41-degree fresh air, hot air, to maintain the room indoor at maybe 20, 21 degrees, 22 degrees centigrade during the winter to make it comfortable. Okay. In addition to these 2 utilities, this would produce around 150 liter of potable chilled water for drinking at 15 to 18 degrees centigrade. It also maintained a 1,000-liter refrigerated cabinet at 10 to 15 degrees centigrade to preserve fresh fruits, vegetables, milk, etc. And while the compressor operated for 6 to 7 hours a day, 2 hours in the morning during breakfast period, 3 hours during lunchtime, and 1.5 hours during the evening during different times, this unit could recover and store around 200 liters of hot water, and it could deliver 2,000 liters of hot water at 60 degrees centigrade for cleaning and sanitation purpose. So the RO water, it could heat up 200 liters of RO water right up to 90-95 degrees centigrade and this could be directly used for cooking. So if you put rice in this, you don't need to heat it up at all. Your rice will get cooked without having to heat it further. This was also used for cooking dal and other, of course, that needed further heating, vegetables and other things. Okay. So as you can see here, 6 utilities being generated. Now the common problem in all these type of systems would be that when the cooling is produced or required, you don't need heating. When the hot water or for cooking or hot water for cleaning is required at that time, the canteen might not be operating. So in our system, this was integrated in such a way that without any pump, we were able to deliver chilled water 24/7. We are able to, for drinking purpose, you just open the tap on the chilled water outlet, and you can drink water from there. Okay, without having any pump to circulate. Overhead tank or RO water would just flow through the heat exchanger and instantly get you the water at 15 to 18 degrees centigrade, suitable for drinking. For cleaning purpose, you just open the tap in the cleaning basin, and the overhead tank water would just enter the heat exchanger. And there was a 1,650 liter storage tank here for hot water for heat storage, and another 330 liter storage here for storing the cooling effect. The cooling effect stored was used for catering to the potable chilled water delivery, as well as for maintaining the refrigerated cabinet. And the hot water, the heat stored in the this was used for delivering 60-degree hot water as well as 95-degree cooking water. So the beauty of this was, without any complications of pumps, recirculation, and so on and so forth, we are able to deliver the hot water, chilled water, air conditioning as and when required, even when the compressor was not operating for air conditioning purpose. And the payback we expected in situations where already solar water heaters were deployed, the payback was estimated to be about less than 2 years. And situations where solar collectors were not yet deployed, and we could take the cost of eliminate that cost or take the cost of that in this one, the payback was coming to only 1 year, less than 1 year. Okay. So this is one of the technologies which NTPC had funded us to develop. Other thing which I would like to call your attention to is the air-to-air heat recovery units. These are plastic air-to-air heat recovery units. Recently, just last month, our patent on this got granted. And in this case, we have a plastic air-to-air heat recovery with air temperature coming in from outdoor at about 42.9 degrees with a low RH of this. Typically, most of the high ambient weathers have low RH at that time. And then this air was cooled and delivered at 25.8 degrees centigrade. And the media used to cool this was essentially, now when this air goes into the conditioned space, an equal amount of flow would be displaced from the conditioned space. And that conditioned space, if it is maintained at around, in this particular example, was maintained at about 26.6 degrees centigrade and 58% RH, typical indoor air conditioned conditions for office or things like that. So if that is the input to this, then it would get it would be humidified first using the rotating contacting device, another one of our patents here, and then that would cool down to 22 degrees centigrade as it gets humidified as it passes over the rotating disc. Now, this would increase the humidity level to about 90%. You can notice that the humidity level has gone up from 12.7 grams per kg of dry air to 15.2 grams. This is not kg, this is grams per kg of this. Okay. In this way, the air temperature would be brought down to 22.2 degrees centigrade before it goes into the heat exchanger, where it is able to cool the air from 42.9 degrees to 25.8 degrees centigrade. And now this 25.8 degrees centigrade outdoor air, fresh air, which is pre-cooled, is now let into the indoor spaces. Now, note that the humidity of this is high. Now, to bring this from here to this, the conventional air conditioning or liquid desiccant based system could be used to do that job. Okay. because here the humidity is 14.4 grams per kg of dry air, and here the outgoing air is 12.7 after it has picked up humidity from the activities in the people working in the space. So obviously this has to be reduced below this value using some other technique, like liquid desiccants can be used, which could be solar regenerated, or conventional air conditioning units could be used just to dehumidify this particular cooled air. Now this cooling, what we just saw here, was free, because this is simply taking the exhaust air and recovering the availability in the exhaust air using some amount of water here. Okay. Note that we have cooled down the air to below its wet bulb temperature here. Now, the wet bulb temperature of this air was 26.5, and the air being delivered is 25.68 degrees centigrade in this example. So that's why the wet bulb effectiveness is more than 100% in this case. And the enthalpy effectiveness, of course, in this case is close to 80%. And although we get such high effectivenesses, the pressure drop is very low. It is just 5.6 mm. Typical pressure drops in conventional air-to-air heat recovery units are of the order of 150 to 200, or at times even 300 pascals. And all this using plastics. One would wonder whether plastics are a good option for heat exchange. But as can be seen here, yes, plastic can be a good option for heat exchange in spite of its extremely low thermal conductivity. This plastic would have a thermal conductivity of the order of 0.15 watts per meter Kelvin. Water, in reference to that, would have a conductivity of 0.56 to 0.6 watts per meter Kelvin. Aluminium would be around 230 to 40 watts per meter Kelvin. Copper around 380, 400 watts per meter Kelvin. So compared to those values, this is extremely low, but it is still much, much higher than the conductivity of air, which is around 0.028 watt per meter Kelvin. So depends on the application and depends on how you deploy the thing. And as you can see here, the plastic heat exchanger enables us to reduce the weight and cost. Typically, cost of a plastic heat exchanger will be almost 8 to 9 times lower compared to a comparable copper-based heat exchanger, or if it is aluminum, it will be at least 3 to 4 times cheaper than aluminum, because density of polypropylene is around 0.9, while that of aluminum is around 2.7 kg per liter. Okay, so you can see that the weight itself becomes 1/3, and then cost per kg of the plastic is obviously going to be lower than cost per kg of aluminum by almost half. So you have about 5 to 6 times difference in the cost per unit surface area. And also, it is easier to produce thinner sheets of plastic than aluminum. Going to the other side now, many of our gensets and turbines or your furnaces and all are exhausting heat at a fairly high temperature. And if we can recover that heat and use it for generating steam, or use it for regenerating liquid desiccant, or use it for heating up air or thermic fluid, we can use it for various processes. Okay, so we have deployed various technologies. These are all based on our patent. In fact, my first patent when I came back to India in 1993 from US was on a hybrid, on a matrix heat recovery unit. Now, this is an example of a matrix heat recovery unit. This is an example of a matrix heat recovery unit. Now, in here, this is recovering heat from the dirty and sooting exhaust from an engine. Engine exhaust typically has unburnt lube oil, unburnt fuel, and it becomes pretty sticky. And exchanging heat with that and recovering heat is a challenge, because it easily fouls up your heat exchanger. And because of that, what happens is your heat exchangers get fouled, your pressure drops increase, your heat transfer coefficients drop, and your overall heat transfer coefficient drops. And then if you want to continue to recover the required amount of heat, your heat exchangers are very large. Conventionally, even today, the conventional exhaust heat recovery systems are larger than the DG sets for steam generation, while our unit is the size of the muffler of the engine. By the way, this installation was in Chennai in a 5-star hotel and installed on 2000 kVA gensets. This was the muffler of that genset, and these are the heat exchangers with insulation. So you can see that the actual heat exchanger inside core would be much smaller. And this was producing steam at around 10.5 bars, 10.5 kg per centimeter square gauge. It's around at 186 degrees saturation temperature, and then that steam was used to operate a double effect LIBR system to produce air conditioning for this. And there were two of these units sitting side by side here. The best part was that the pressure drop across this heat exchanger was less than the pressure drop in the muffler. So there was no additional back pressure on the engine because of the unique design. And these heat exchangers were very easy to clean because the gases passed through straight tubes. The heat exchangers had the advantage of combining the benefits of a gas tube boiler and a water tube boiler. The inventory of 1000 kVA genset exhaust heat recovery, this on the water side, was less than 18 liters. And in those days, almost 20 years ago, these units would qualify as a non-IBR unit. Okay, even for 1000 kVA genset. Okay, now this is another unit. These were modular. So here we have deployed two modules, and there was a sonic soot blower and a soot blowing using steam. Both options were there, or compressed air. And then this is another unit which we deployed on a 7.5 megawatt gas turbine. Okay, and our size was 1/3 the size which otherwise the international consultant has allocated for this based on the conventional design. So our design was 1/3 the size, and this was used for heating thermic fluid from 230 degrees to 250 degrees centigrade using exhaust from a gas turbine. Now, exhaust from a gas turbine is typically extremely clean, so there was no issues about fouling in this particular case. Another example here of a clean exhaust heat recovery was a micro gas turbine of 50 kilowatt. This entire unit was fabricated in a lab. Then we have center exhaust heat recovery. Then we have coal-fired furnace exhaust heat recovery. In this case, we had deployed a heat exchanger inside this, which could be shaken up while it is in operation, and all the dry dust would fall down. So earlier, this was deployed in the modern bakery at R.A. Mill Colony, which is in Mumbai. And they used to open up their conventional shell and tube heat exchanger every day to clean up the passages. And after we deployed this unit, they were able to generate steam for humidifying the baking tunnel. And they didn't have to, the chief engineer sent us a note saying that they have not opened the system for more than 3 months. And they wanted one more unit to be so we built another unit with all the learnings from the first deployment, and then licensed the technology for them to multiply them in their other 16 facilities. So this was about heat recovery. Then we have also a portfolio of sorption refrigeration systems, which are heat-driven refrigeration systems, hybrid air conditioning systems, which are energy-efficient air conditioners using liquid desiccants. We're talking about COPs higher than 5. Our 5-star AC typically goes to around 3.6 or so. We're talking about more than 5 COP. The shipboard chilling using engine exhaust from the fishing engine and using it for adsorption refrigeration system for producing chilled water, chilled seawater, which can be then used for preserving the fish on board. Then we have liquid desiccant based heat pumps for heating, for air conditioning, potable water cooling. Okay. We have another technology. Hello. Is behind? Can you please mute? Okay, thank you. So the next technology I would like to talk about is the rotating contacting device. Now, here is an example of a wastewater vaporizer, which is essentially bringing the wastewater in contact with ambient air, and a thorough contact with the ambient air enables the ambient air to vaporize the wastewater without having to supply any heat to it. So depending upon the water, the salt composition of the wastewater and the concentration and all, we're able to vaporize water very, very effectively with COPs, vaporization COPs as high as 36 to 55. Now, in some of our latest units, we have gone up to even 60, 63, 64, 63 COP. Well, the COP is defined as the water vaporized into its latent heat of vaporization divided by the energy input to the fan and the pump. In this case, there was no heat being supplied here. The pump was supplying the pumping the water from the trough to the top, and then through the holes here in the pipe, the water will come out. And these discs will rotate, the rotors will rotate because of off-center loading of this, and that will maintain the entire disc surface on both sides of the disc. The disc in this case was around 1 foot in diameter, about 300 mm in diameter, and the surface area provided here in this particular unit was around 1,100 meters square for a footprint of the basin of just about 6.6 meters square, so 6.2 meters square. Okay. So the enhancement in the surface area offered compared to an open pond, solar pond is often used for vaporizing wastewater, was around 120 times in this particular example. Okay. And the fan power was only 0.72 kilowatt and the pump power was only 280 watts. So the total power consumed was around 1 kilowatt, and we are vaporizing a very large amount of water during the day. So in this case, the noise were also less, and the rotating plastic discs were less susceptible to fouling. And we have been operating some of these units in the industry with even 270,000 TDS, okay, for vaporizing that waste water, and instead of putting it through triple effect vaporizers, which are very costly and cumbersome to maintain. The rotating assemblies are easy to clean with just a jet of water. Now, a similar unit has been also deployed as a cooling tower. We'll see that later. Then on renewable front, we have plastic windmills. We have plastic solar air heaters. As you can see in Leh Ladakh, these collectors, even in minus 40 degrees centigrade, minus 30 degrees centigrade, we could give 40-degree warm air for space heating. Okay. And then solar steam generators, as you can see here, these are heat pipe based steam generators. Okay. And then solar air heaters, which can heat up air right from ambient temperature to 150 to 300 degrees centigrade. We have gone up to 360 degrees maximum in a single pass in these things. And note that the 1.2 meter square collector here was driven with only a 14-watt fan, okay, which was PV operated fan to get the hot air delivered. Okay. And then, of course, we had a solar refrigerator cum water heater, as I told about, with an activated carbon ammonia-based refrigeration system deployed inside the evacuated glass tubes here. And that would produce ammonia. It will condense and give us cooling. And that cooling would be stored in the ice bank tank inside the refrigerated cabinet, and which would maintain the refrigerated cabinet cool throughout the 24 hours. Okay. And the heat of adsorption would be recovered as hot water for bathing and other applications for a residential water heater cum refrigerator. On the latest technologies that we have to offer on renewable side is ambient air heaters from 25 to 75. So they look like just like simple solar collectors. Okay. And these can be used as a roof of a structure. In fact, we have some photographs in Nagaland. We have deployed 27 of these collectors of 2.1 meters square each as roof of the facility, the agro processing facility there. And then the hot air being drawn from this is used for drying of the agro produce. So once through drying, heating of air from 25 to 75 is easily possible in this. The maximum temperature that we have achieved in these type of collectors is around 19.6 degrees centigrade in Mumbai. Okay. Okay, so ambient temperature air going in at about 30, 32 degrees and coming out at around 119 in a non-tracking collector. By the way, even these collectors are seasonally tracked, they are not tracked continuously. Okay, the concentration ratio is low of about 2.1 in this particular example. Then we have flat plate steam generators also, which can produce steam at 1 bar. And we have deployed these also for cooking and various other, for effluent treatment and things like that also. Now, the best part is these collectors are very light compared to the conventional collectors. These collectors are almost one half to one third the weight of the conventional collectors. The efficiencies are better than the conventional collectors. For air heaters, even heating up to 80 degrees centigrade, we have achieved efficiencies as high as 75-80% based on global radiation. Efficiency for steam generation has typically been between 40 to 60% depending upon the radiation level. At 1000 watt per meter square, we can easily get to efficiencies of around 60% for generating steam at 100 degrees centigrade. Okay, saturated steam at 100 degrees centigrade. The costs are low. The air heaters are much cheaper than the steam generators. And we can use these for cooking, baking, and various other residential space heating and other industrial heating requirements. Then we also developed the collector for cooking application where storage was required. And so typical household will cook maybe a couple of times during the day, maybe morning breakfast, afternoon lunch, and then maybe some tiffin and dinner at night. So since most of the period in between would not be the heat needs to be collected and stored somewhere. So instead of having a pump and other mechanism to deliver the heat collected from the collector to the storage and then from storage to the user point, we decided that we'll just store the heat within the collector itself. And using an absorber integrated steam generator, this solar steam generator, we have achieved temperatures as high as 245 degrees centigrade in this non-tracking collector in Mumbai. Okay, this quite typically on a good solar day, this 240 degrees would be reached. Okay, and overall efficiency was recorded to be typically between 40 to 60. On a good solar day, it will be closer to 60%. And the cost here was around 10,000 for all stainless steel body unit, okay, for the collector. And this we deployed for cooking, for residential, commercial, and this. So here is an example of solar air heaters which we have used for which could be deployed in Leh Ladakh, and then we have stainless steel tanks which would store the heat in the form of store the heat here. Okay. And even in minus 20 degrees, we can give 40 degrees centigrade hot air, and with efficiencies of the order of 50 to 60% in this particular example. And these can be off-grid. Off-grid because with just one single 1 meter square PV panel would be adequate to extract heat in the form of hot air from 20 meter squares of this collector. Okay, 1 meter square PV panel can recover heat from this, and this was possible because of the extremely low pressure drop through our through our solar air heater, which typically was between 1.5 to 1.5 mm of water pulse. Now we have deployed some of our technology for cold store cum dryer. In this case, the cold store is maintained at about 6 degrees centigrade. This was deployed in Nagaland. Okay. To preserve the leftovers from the local vegetable market at the end of the day. And then the heat of that condenser was recovered to dry the produce using the condenser heat recovery drying operation. And in order to avoid backup genset and other things, we had built in an inbuilt storage. So even up to 4 hours, if the electricity is not available, the cooling effect will be supplied through the ice bank tank, which was deployed inside. Then we had, as I said, we had deployed 27 collectors of 2.1 meters square up here, this, and that hot air was drawn in through a 36 watt fan, which is just about 3 panels. 1 meter square panel were more than sufficient to collect heat from all these collectors. And some of the products that were dried using this, you can look at the texture, luster, and things like that. And the ginger and ginger candy and other things. And just to come to the economics of this, you can see that the payback here was around 187 days for ginger drying using heat pump operated to concurrently give cold store and drying utility. Okay. Then if it were for Naga chilies are very high value product, and so the payback went down to just 65 days. Okay, for the cost of the cost of the heat pump and cost of the dryer and other things. Okay. Then when we looked at a solar dryer, the one which I just showed based on a solar air heaters, and there the payback was around 77 days for the Naga chilies and around 225 days for the ginger drying application. Okay, the cost of the solar air heaters was 2 lakh. The biomass backed up dryer was around 1 lakh, which my Nagaland partners had developed. So we integrated the solar collectors with that, and then the integrated system was a grid independent system, and the payback was as low as 225. Okay, so value addition for agro produce, basically the impact on energy usage using multi-utility heat pump and plastic solar air heaters and backup. This was demonstrated here successfully. Okay, I'll not get into this, but as I said, benefits of energy conservation mainly can be realized through reducing the demand for the utilities, and then our target is to reduce the life cycle cost and make them environmental friendly. Okay, so various options are possible. Reducing demand for utilities using multi-utility heat pumps, which can co-produce cold, hot, dehumidification utilities, potable water, electricity using a single unit. Okay, superheat recovery from refrigeration systems can not only give you free hot water, it can also improve the performance of the refrigeration unit in terms of improved cooling capacity and COP. Preheating of boiler feed water can be considered to be free if air conditioning is what is the primary demand. And peak demand for domestic heating can be reduced to over 95%. In fact, we have also talked about making the demand negative. That is actually saving power for the AC as compared to solar can only save you electricity for heating or energy for heating the water. But superheat recovery can not only give you free hot water, it can also reduce the power consumption of the AC. So that's the bigger this without and that too with very little maintenance. So life cycle cost reduction is possible using multi-utility heat pumps, environment friendly because you are using multiple, you're generating multiple utilities using a single system. Less systems need to be maintained, less emissions because of less refrigerant being used, and so on and so forth. And renewables can be backed up with these kind of multi-utility generators. So this is about the tube heat exchanger. How much time do I have, sir? So that accordingly, I think I have covered most of the core things. I would like to.
Yeah, sir, you can go up to 12:45.
12:45. So another 20 minutes, say?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. So I'll just zip through some of the things and then take some questions. So in case.
Yeah,
okay.
that is also good.
So this is a tube heat exchanger patent, which we have. As I said, we can have two tubes put side by side with a thermal bonding material. The thermal bonding material depends on the tube material itself. Okay, I can have copper, and then this could be brazed with a copper brazing alloy. If I can have stainless steel and copper, but then I will need a silver alloy, which is unaffordable. So we have different thermal bonding materials which we use for different applications. So you can for ammonia and seawater, like what we did in our shipboard chilling unit, we had ammonia passing through stainless steel tubes and seawater passing through cupronickel tubes. Now, conventionally, you would need a titanium heat exchanger to do that job if you were to use any of the conventional heat exchangers, whether it is plate type, shell and tube type, or tube in tube type, or things like that. But here you can get away with a lower cost cupronickel compared to titanium and a much lower cost stainless steel or carbon steel on the ammonia side. So that is the beauty of these heat exchangers. You can have two heat exchangers side by side, two tubes side by side. If you have a gas exchanging heat with water, you can have two gas side passages because the density is low, the heat specific heat is low, and so on and so forth. So you need and the heat transfer coefficient is low, so you need more surface area for the gas side. So all those flexibilities are built in. Now, just to give you some idea, we have done heat exchangers with 6 fluids exchanging heat with each other in a single heat exchanger and deployed it in industrial applications, and they have been working well. Okay, These are some of the features of the tube heat exchanger. The novel, this have no upper and lower limit in capacity. As I said, we have done even a couple of kilowatts duty all the way up to 270-ton ammonia respiration system. We have done these superheaters for that. And if somebody asks us to do it for 3,000, we'll not blink an eye. Okay. So we can, there is no limit on the capacity. It is vented double wall, so it is very, very safe. No chance of mixing of the fluids. Okay. Then we have high heat transfer coefficients because of the bends and things like that in the this. And the material choice, we can have independent choice for material for the individual fluids that it is handling. And it's easy to fabricate and easy to clean using clean in place. This now recently we have deployed it for even milk chillers and things like that. Recently licensed technology for instant milk chiller. So recovery of heat from radiator hot water, superheat recovery from this, liquid desiccant regeneration using heat pumps, fuel oil high heating, thermic fluid heating, and so on and so forth. Viscous fluids, transformer oil cooling, lube oil cooling is one of the projects we're doing for Navy right now. Heating and cooling of potable water, because potable water we don't want any chance of the mixing of this. So typically you would have either double wall heat exchangers or thing like that, and that increases the cost, or you have a separate heat exchanger. You first heat or cool the fluid and then use that clean fluid to heat or cool the potable water. In our case, we can do it in single step, reducing simplifying the system, reducing the cost, and so on and so forth. Then heating and cooling of sensitive fluids like honey, milk, fruit juices with fibrous material within that, and shear sensitive fluids like blood, etc., can also be exchanged heat in this without causing any damage to the fluid. They can also be used as tubular reactors for various others. So a typical superheat recovery unit will be installed, as I said, between the compressor and the condenser, and this is what we have done. Okay. These are some of the applications for residential, commercial, industrial applications. We can go through these things later. So up to 20% energy saving of the chiller is possible, reduction in electrical usage is possible, and the fuel 100% saving on the hot utility being generated. Okay. And we have seen paybacks as low as 3 to 12 months for these things. These are some photographs of some of the units here in this particular heat exchanger from a 60-ton ammonia refrigeration unit in a dairy. Heat was recovered to heat up water from 30 to 60 degrees in a single pass. 800 liters was being heated. The payback estimated was around 6 months in this, and it took only half a day to integrate the system into the running plant. This was the Hotel Faryaz unit, which was installed on a 9-year-old unit. And when this got integrated, it increased the cooling capacity of that chiller by 30%. Okay, and they continue to operate the chiller up to 20 years total life. That is 11 more years after we integrated this. And the power saving was around 20% because that was an old chiller. The saving was very significant. And this was in addition to the hot water being produced, 12 to 24,000 liters of hot water from 30 to 60 degrees centigrade. This was a unit which was fabricated as part of my PhD students' thesis work. And here we had promised them 6-month payback. They actually got a payback of 3 months, 2.86 months to be precise. And the CO2 emission saving was around 1,100 tons in 11 years. The annual saving was 10 lakh rupees, while the installed cost was only 2 lakh rupees. And the best part is after 11 years, when they scrapped the unit, they got 5 lakh rupees for the scrap value of the copper that they did. Copper prices had gone up from 180 to almost 660 when they scrapped the unit. This is another example of the superheat recovery where 70,000 liters of hot water is produced in single pass from 30 to 70 degrees centigrade. Okay. And was recovered from a 270-ton ammonia refrigeration system. There were 2 modules of 135 ton, and the chiller power saving was there of 5%, and of course all the hot water was free. Again, the payback we had promised was 6 months, and we got less than 6 months. The annual saving was 23 lakh rupees, and the cost of the installed system was 10 lakh rupees. Okay, the emission saving per year was 330 tons. Then this was the first McDonald unit which we deployed, where the power saving on the AC was 12 to 15.6%. Of course, the AC cooling capacity might have also gone up, but we didn't have any reliable means of measuring it. And it was generating around 240 liters of hot water per hour, heating from 27 to 70 degrees to 60 degrees centigrade in a single pass. Later on, they deployed around total of around 340 units in various McDonald outlets. So the time when all the McDonald outlets in the south and western zone were fitted with our unit at the time. So various types of heat pumps, if we were to quickly take a review, it can be heating only, heating in winter, cooling and dehumidification in summer, or simultaneous cooling in heating, and multi-utility, which can simultaneously cater to cooling, water heating, portable water chilling, so on and so forth. And now what we have graduated to is multi-utility generator with flexibility in tapping the utility. Okay. So when you want air conditioning, you don't want hot water, doesn't matter. You can take the hot water whenever you want. You can take the potable water whenever you want, and so on and so forth. Now, similar heat pumps can also be based on absorption and adsorption refrigeration systems, and liquid desiccant also, which is not added here actually. Okay, so we have done solar refrigerator come water heater, the multi-utility heat pump, you can say. Then dehumidified fresh air, portable water generation and water heating with a liquid desiccant system. We have done this. Solar liquid desiccant system. We have done this. They can be backed up with this solar PV or solar thermal this, and biomass backup can be there for the cold stores and all in case sun is not available. Shipboard chilling using engine exhaust from the fishing trawler engine exhaust. We have done this, and currently also we have one project going on. Morning just before your this, I had a call from one of my clients who is installing this on their this to produce potable water, desalinating seawater using this exhaust. Tractor cabin air conditioning. This was the first unit which we deployed in Mahindra & Mahindra for 33 kilowatt of heating with only 11 kilowatt of input power, and air conditioning and chilled water of 300 liters per hour at 18 degrees was a bonus. This was the team at the time. So this is how the unit gets integrated. The condenser is used to heat up this. The tube heat exchanger is deployed here to directly integrate in a very reliable manner. Solution heating up to 55. And then on the evaptor side, air conditioning is the primary this, and as and when chilled water is needed, you can chill the water also. So this unit I already discussed at the time, and it can be used for generating multiple utilities. It can be used for simultaneous heating and cooling of fluids. Okay. It can be used in automotive industries, small scale industries, agro producing units, and so on and so forth. And now we are deploying it in hotels and other things also, and residences also, very small units of 1.5 ton systems for that. So in this particular example, heating duty was 36 kilowatt, that is 55 to 50 to 55 degree heating. Power input was only 12 kilowatts. So the heating COP was 3. And so about 66% energy saving on the heating bill here. And then the bonus utility produces chilled water as and when required, and air conditioning. So whenever air conditioning would be 24 plus 12 will give you 36 of heating. Or if you're tapping part of the cooling effect in the chilled water, then the air conditioning will appropriately reduce. And air temperature would be from the room air at 27 would be cooled down to about 18. So it would be cooled dehumidified air. So as I said, in this case, we are taking the air from both sides, gets filtered, goes through the evaporator coils placed behind it, and then these fans return it back into the room. And while this is happening, the hot water is recovered from the condenser side. And chilled water also, there's the additional heat exchanger inside which produces chilled water. So this is a water-to-water heat pump. That was an air water-to-water. Heat was taken from air, part of it from water, and then delivered to water. In this case, it is just water to water. So on one side, we are chilling water from 12 to 7, similar to what a conventional air conditioner would be, chiller would be doing. And on the other side, the heat from the evaporator plus the compressor power of 15 kilowatts is delivered as heating utility. Now here you'll note that around 3 kilowatt it should be 58, but we are recovering only this because there will be some heat losses and things like that from the uninsulated pumping and other things from the compressors and all. Okay, so even with this 55 kilowatt of heating with 15 kilowatt of input power is a very attractive deal. And to top it off, now if we are able to get 43 kilowatts of chilled water, this we developed through a Ministry of Textile funding. Okay, and we are deployed in Club Mahindra, Goa, and many other automotive industries also. This was the thing which I had discussed in detail, a 24-ton system with 2 compressors. It is a evaporatively condensed system at McDonald's, 25 to 36% energy saving, and water heated to 55 degrees for sanitation, 500 liters per hour of hot water being produced as bonus utility, and portable chilled water of 300 liters per hour at 18 degrees was also delivered. This was the multi-utility heat pump I talked about. I think we've already gone through this slide in detail. These are the utilities. When you want to go through the thing, you can go through these things in detail. You'll see that the heating duty is 93 kilowatt hours per day. At peak capacity, design capacity is 35 kilowatt. The peak cooking water heating capacity is 62.7 kilowatt. Okay, so these two put together itself is around 100 kilowatt. Okay, instantaneous this, and both can be tapped at the same time. Now, a 12-ton compressor-based heat pump can never give you this unless there is storage. So the built-in storage is able to do that. And then we have RO water heating and RO water cooling for drinking purpose, and the refrigerator. Refrigerator load, as you can see, is extremely small. Okay, then we have technology for panel heat exchangers, which are radiant panels for heating and all those things. Okay, so these we can pass refrigerant through this or chilled water through this, and then this entire panel aluminum extrusion gets heated or cooled, and then that can radiate or this with our surrounding air. So we have deployed cooling dehumidification panels with plastic. We have deployed, this is the unit which I talked about, my multi-utility 4-in-1 heat pump in my house. I have been using it since 2003. Okay. So this is the panel, radiant panel, based on a patented panel heat exchanger, where this cools and dehumidifies the air in this, and the ceiling fan is able to transfer the heat. Now, just to give you some idea about the benefits of this, not only that it gives me a higher evaporating temperature, so the 1.5-ton compressor gives me almost 2 tons of cooling using the same compressor, and with a higher COP. The power input typically is around 1.4 kilowatt or even lower for a 2-ton capacity. So that's a very high efficiency, while it is also generating hot water. The best part is that this heat exchanger which I have deployed, I have not cleaned it for the last 6+ years. Not a single time I have cleaned this unit. Now, your conventional high wall fan coil units or your cassettes and all need to be cleaned up. The filters need to be cleaned up almost every 3 months or so if you want good performance. Here, the dirt just simply goes and sticks to the thing, and then because of the water, it just drains down and it all drains out of this. I have not cleaned this system for the last 5-6 years, as I said, since they have been installed in my house. This is in my lab, in my office. We have used these radiant panels as condensers and heat pump water cooler. We have used radiant ice bank tanks for storing and delivering cooling effect. The rotating contacting device, we have already talked about using it for wastewater. We have used it for cooling tower. Now we have deployed a 200-ton cooling tower. You'll just see that. And we also licensed technology for biogas scrubbing using water. So this is the wastewater. This is liquid heat exchanger using liquid desiccant. This is the aeration device using the mechanism. So the advantages of the rotating contacting device is it is simple in construction, very versatile. It can handle a wide range of L/G ratios. They're modular design, so no upper or lower limit of this. Low carryover, almost no carryover. So liquid desiccant carryover has been one of the major problems. Eliminated that. High mass transfer coefficients are possible because of the textured disc and the rotation of the disc and so on and so forth. And the best part is the pressure drop across this is extremely low, less than 1 mm of water column, okay, at around 1.5 meter per second velocity. And we have discs available in polypropylene, polycarbonate, stainless steel, high grade stainless steels, aluminum, mild steel, and even this coating. Okay. for various applications. So can be used for aeration, for air conditioning applications like humidification, liquid desiccant dehumidification, air washers, air-to-air heat recovery, cooling towers, evaporative coolers, indirect evaporative coolers. We have already deployed these applications. Liquid desiccant-based regeneration in heat pumps, scrubbing of gases. We are also designing a crematorium exhaust scrubber using our this now. Wastewater and effluent concentrators for RO plants, and this some of our units have been operating for over 3 years now for these applications. This can be used for kitchen hood exhaust cleaning and all those things. The power consumption of the fan and all those things can come down significantly. So as I said here, you can see here the COP is 64.6, as high as this in this case example. And then these are the 200-ton cooling tower that we have deployed. And the best part is our power consumption in this case. Now our latest power consumption is 1.5 kilowatt as compared to conventional 200-ton deployed with 7.5 kilowatt of power input. Okay, that's because of our low pressure drop and very large frontal area for our cooling tower. Now then we have a wire thin heat exchanger also. This patent has been granted in India as well as 3 European patents are there. Now you can see how many different streams can exchange heat. One outside, one here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 6 fluids can exchange heat with each other in this particular thing. And these are again modular, flexible inserts are there, high heat transfer coefficient, high mass transfer coefficient. Material can be of choice. This easy to maintain and this. And we have used these for air conditioning applications in condenser, evaporator, desuperheater, air-to-air heat recovery, heat pipes, dry cooling towers for fuel cell vehicles, radiators for heavy this. A long list of things, indirect evaporator condensers for seawater and treated wastewater, absorption refrigeration systems, chemical reactors. Okay, energy storage. We have deployed ice bank tank for our latest milk chiller. So our air heater has this, which heats it up air from ambient to 150 to 300 has this kind of configuration. Then the diabetic cooling tower, we have these aluminum extrusions, proprietary. This passage is built in, and then the disc rotating here. So again, similar benefits, no carryover and other things. These are some of the applications for these. These are some of the photographs of the deployed unit. This was basically based on this evaporator condensers, as you saw before. Liquid desiccant hybrids. We can go from 1 to 4 in a single step using a hybrid air conditioning system. The advantage here is that you're cooling, the minimum temperature on the air side is only 24 here. So your evaporator need not be operating at 7.2. It can operate even at 18 degrees if the compressor can handle that. Okay. So that will increase the evaporator temperature, evaporator pressure will increase, evaporator pressure will increase the evaporator vapor density, increase evaporator vapor density will increase your mass flow rate through the compressor, and mass flow rate increase through the compressor can then increase your cooling capacity. So the cooling capacity for a given compressor can go up by 20 to 40%. Energy saving because of reduced pressure ratio can be 30 to 60%. Okay, modular units are possible, and COPs higher than this are possible. This is an integrated system. The liquid desiccant loop is shown here, and the vapor compression loop is shown here in between. Okay, so COP is higher than 5 is possible, and that's because of reduced pressure ratio, improved volumetric efficiency, reduced volume displacement required for a given capacity, or decreased swept volume required for a given capacity, and so on and so forth. So that reduces the compressor size, increases the COP, and so on. Then we have dedicated air-to-air heat recovery units. We have already discussed the plastic air-to-air heat recovery units. So here is another example of those heat exchangers. Okay. So this we have already gone through here. We have deployed a 2000 CFM air-to-air heat recovery in a biosafety lab in IIT Bombay, which has been working since 2000 for the last 5-6 years probably. Okay. This we have already covered these things. You can see here 220 to 250 degrees centigrade. The heat recovery in this particular example was 1.7, and our heat exchanger was 1/3 the size of the conventional unit. There is a micro gas turbine recuperator. The challenge was to keep this below 200 kg. Then the next limit, they reduced it to 120 kg. We delivered at 96 kg for the first unit. This was the import substitute. Then exhaust heat recovery, we have discussed these also. Very low pressure drops across the flue gas side. These are some of the typical available heat in the generator, exhaust heat recovery, and so on and so forth. So if you recover from the generator exhaust heat, you can get about, you have about 33% in the exhaust, you can recover about 22% from that. We have about 24% in the radiator hot water circuit, we can recover about 22% on this and so on and so forth. Okay. These are some of the COP listed for various types of cycles, single effect between 0.7 to this for LIBR water, double effect, ammonia water, single effect, ammonia water gas cycle, and lithium liquid desiccant based systems which we have developed. As I said, this latest paper is going to come up in the ISHRAE handbook, ISHRAE journal. Okay, COPs of 1.6 to this without any system component being under pressure or vacuum. That's the beauty of this. Okay, so we'll see some of those things. Then our radiator hot water fired absorption refrigeration system, 10 ton of cooling possible with 125 kVA DG set. This we have already discussed, the shipboard chilling unit. Air heaters. Now here you can see the temperature going up to 104 in a single pass. Air enters here from ambient at about 33 in this example and comes out at 104 here. Air enters at 29 degrees and goes out at 150 to 300 depending upon what time of the day and how much radiation is spent on this. This is a non-tracking collector, by the way. So you can see the temperature profiles. Right in the morning at 9:30, the temperature is more than 140, 145 degrees centigrade. Towards the noon on this particular day, it has reached around 288 degrees centigrade. And then even at 5:30 in the evening, it is still higher than 150. Okay. And the integrated 9-hour integrated efficiency is more than 60%. This is a table showing the year-round performance and east-west and north-south orientation. East-west is the preferred orientation, as you can see from here. You get higher efficiencies. North-south gives lower efficiency. So typically around 60% is possible. The integrated daily efficiency. This is the heat pipe-based system. We had 66 evaporators and a single condenser in this serviceable heat pipe. The beauty of this is the heat pipe can be serviced in the field without any difficulty. In just half an hour, I can go evacuate the heat pipe assembly, and all the tubes will get recharged with appropriate disk. So these are some of the things. Now this is of course the older technology. You can see throughout the day you can get steam at a steady temperature. These are some of the efficiencies. While the same collector is used as hot water heater, once through 30 to 80 degrees, efficiency of 6 hours is about 76.6%. This is the storage type unit. Here is a 300 cooking for 300 people using these collectors. They deployed it in one of the hostels here. Okay. This is the solar air conditioning multi-utility heat pump. Solar collector delivering the heat to the liquid desiccant, regenerating it, and then hot water is produced, potable water is produced, and air conditioning is deployed inside. This was the older technology. The latest one will be deployed here. We're expecting a payback of about 3 years here. These are some of the various technologies that we have. This is not a comprehensive list, but this can give you some idea about that. Okay, so I think I'll just briefly conclude here. Plastic and aluminum air-to-air heat recovery units can be used in air conditioning systems. Okay, attractive paybacks are possible, and these dedicated outdoor air systems can be very effective. Exhaust heat from gas turbines, engines, furnaces, centers can be used, and the typical payback would be anywhere between 6 to 18 months. Typically 6 months if you have around a year utilization. You have at least uses for 10 to 12 hours per day. Then we can use lithium bromide water systems, double effect to club with these recovered heat, or as I said, the latest is liquid desiccant systems can give you very high COPs. Okay. And on the other hand, you have superheat recovery and hot heat pumps. As I said, most of the time your COP paybacks can be 6 months or lower also for superheat recovery. And for multi-utility heat pumps, it can be typically less than a year. Okay. So 3 to 6 months for superheat recovery and 3 to 18 months, depending on how many hours you're using it and things like that. So basically, our technologies are opening up applications for economically attractive this, and then using affordable solar collectors. We can use it for space heating, drying, desalination. We can use it for high temperature, this like milk dryers and so on and so forth, liquid desiccant, fresh air dehumidification, solar cookers, solar ovens, and so on and so forth. And then there are a lot of different possibilities. These are some of the technologies that we have deployed in matrix heat recovery for various things, tube-to-tube heat exchangers, multi-utility heat pumps for contacting devices for various applications, evaporative condensers. I think I'm done with this. So this is my last slide, second last slide, panel heat exchangers, plastic windmills, biofuel heat exchangers. So thanks very much for your patient hearing. So if you have time and if you have some questions, I can try addressing a few of them. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you very much for sharing your rich experience, practical knowledges, and real-time devices you shown what you have built. It was very nice to see all those things. And now the floor is open for discussions. And first we will take up the questions that are posted in the chat box. So we have a few questions here. First question is from Professor Madhusudan B from the host institution. So it reads like this. Sir, on what areas we need to work on so that we can bring CO2 refrigeration to normal refrigerator systems, that is household refrigeration systems? Please, sir.
Okay. CO2 is, as you all know, is a very high pressure system. Okay. And first thing you need to get low cost compressors. I think our tube-tube heat exchangers can easily be used for the heat exchangers required. So that's not a problem. But the compressors, the cost of the compressors need to be reduced. And so compressor technology has to be developed so that it can be used, developed for this. I think if you want to use it in the refrigerator, I am of the view that I would bet my time and money on air and water as a media for the future of the air conditioning refrigeration. So I think a refrigerator need not use CO2. I would rather use plain simple air. Okay, but appropriate technologies need to be developed. In fact, we have just filed 3 patents on different types of compressors, and we are yet to file a new compressor patent, which can do near isothermal compression. So we won't have the high pressures or the low pressures that typically one would encounter in the refrigeration system, and yet give you very, very high performance. So CO2 compressor should be targeted because the compressors available are extremely costly as of now, and I don't think people I have not come across CO2 compressors for this refrigerator yet. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And the next question is from Professor Bhanuprakash HS from host institution. He has 2 points to discuss. First one is, sir, does the fumed silica be a good refrigerant? And second point is, how does the nitrogen play the important role in HVAC?
Okay. First question was fume hood silica.
Fumed silica, yes, sir. Fumed silica be a good refrigerant?
No, I didn't understand what is the question. Fume hood silica.
Yes, sir. Fumed silica. Does the fumed silica be a good refrigerant?
I'm sorry, I'm not able to understand how fume hood silica. I thought fume hood silica is a solid, right?
Okay, sir.
I'm sorry, I probably don't understand.
Right. Sir, it's all right.
Sorry.
So the next point here is how does the nitrogen play the important role in HVAC?
Nitrogen play important role in HVAC. As I said, as of now, nitrogen is not being used in HVAC to my knowledge. Okay, but as I said, air can be used. I am bullish that ultimately air can be used for catering to air conditioning. Air is a working media. Okay, so air and water as a working media. So air is predominantly nitrogen. So if you want to say it that way. but why purify nitrogen? Then you can might as well this. I don't know whether the question is in the form that if we separate out nitrogen from the indoor air, will that be better or something? I don't know what the question is trying to. Maybe the professor can clarify, and then I can try to attempt to answer on that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So the next point is from Dr. Vignesh Naik from the host institution. Sir, how do you go about identifying research area and proceed with your work? Also, I would like to know what is the typical or average time that you and your team spent on an individual project?
Okay, it's very difficult to tell you average time. But let me tell you now, because many things are happening over so many years. Okay, but if we take a new project, typically we might take it, say maybe 6 months, 9 month project. Okay, and as you saw, most of my projects have been consultancy projects. We have only taken maybe about 15, 20 sponsored projects, and that too only a couple of them, 5, 6 might be the big ones. But otherwise, most of my projects have been consultancy. And as you know, the industry people are always in a hurry. So we typically talk about, some of them 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. But at times they do get extended this because halfway through the scope might change or something like that. After you deliver something, the scope changes. So because they're not able to sell it or something like that, then we need to redo it. Like this is an example of a recent milk chiller. We started off with my recommendation was sensible storage, but then after we went through some of the things, because of some cleaning things, the CIP and other things, they thought that reducing the water volume will be better. So then halfway through we switched over to ice bank storage. Okay. So something which was supposed to be a 9-month project probably got extended to almost 18 months. But now their product is launched, and I think they're getting very good traction in the industry. Most of our products are better than the best worldwide, not just in India. Okay. So the question was, how do we identify the thing? Most of the time, what happens is, like I made this presentation. Somebody might see this, and then they might come back, can we have this and this? So then we first ask them to give us the information as to what they want, and then what is the best available in the industry that they are aware of, and then we propose something based on what we can do, and then we come to some common terms, what is deliverable, what is the time frame, and all those things, and then we take on the project. So that is how we typically go ahead.
Right, sir. Thank you very much. And we have one more question from Professor Swaroop from the host institution. The question is, why is Freon for air conditioners so expensive?
Mainly the patent, they're capitalizing the patents and this technology costs and all those things. Not only just technology costs, they're making profit. And that's why many of the things we should be trying to use natural reference as far as possible. And that's the reason why because we have still not found a non-flammable, low global warming, low environment impact referent yet, even to replace, because even while 22 is being phased out in India, it has been phased out in many parts of the world already, developed parts. Even 134A, 407C, 410A, all these are also on the outgoing list. And newer referent 1, 2, 3, 4, that series, they're extremely costly. So I think, why should we be spending time on these things? Why not just look at air, water, and this? And ammonia is, of course, a very good reference also. So if we reduce the inventory, then it can give you good options.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. I think no more questions from the participants.
Okay,
so,
thank you very much. I hope it will be useful for all of you.
Okay, okay, sir. Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
So now,
I would request if you could share this video if you have recorded it, so that it will be useful.
Sure, sir. Sure. We'll do it, sir. We'll do it.
And you can share it with me, as well as if any of the participants or anybody wants to use it, they can also.
Right, sir. Right.
Sir,
right.
we will be uploading this in the YouTube, sir.
Okay, thank you. Just give me a link so that I can download
Yeah, we will send you the link, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Namaskar. And all the best.
So,
Be safe.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing your profound knowledge with us. Thank you
Sure.
for
It was a
accepting our invitation and sparing your valuable time.
Yeah.
On behalf of the department, institution, and management, I take this opportunity to express the gratitude for the support extended by you in making our FDP more valuable. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very
Have a
much.
nice
And I would like to put on record, Professor Sridhara's this. He forwarded your request, and that
Yes,
is
sir.
how something happened. So thank you, all of you. Thank you. Good day.
So, participants, please note. So, with this, I will wind up the second session. Thanks to all participants. Our next session will be at 2:30 p.m. So, please assemble back at 2:30 p.m. So, thank you, one and all. Thank you very much.